Victor Davis Hanson, quote, Rome worked when foreigners crossed through its borders to become Romans. It failed when newcomers fled into the empire and adhered to their own cultures.
Yes.
Close quote. Explain that.
Well, historically, there's three elements to immigration that adjudicate whether it's failed or successful. One, is it diverse? When people come into Rome, do they come into Rome from all over the Mediterranean or the Eastern world, or do they just come from across the Danube and the Rhine,
Right,
as they did in the 5th century? Number two, is it measured? Do people come in numbers that so one immigrant meets 10 natives, or one person from Gaul, or one person from Poland then meets 10 Italians, and they learn how to assimilate and
right,
intermarry and integrate? Or do they come en masse and create enclaves? And then number three, do they come under some legal auspices and learn the language, and it's measured and it's some degree meritocratic? And if those conditions have been met, as they have been mostly in American history, then it works wonderfully. It enriches the body politic. People are invigorated by these new people who want to be American more than they do. However, if you allow it not to be diverse, but largely from one area,
Mexico
or Latin America, then the people are not going to assimilate quick enough, because they're going to be an en bloc. And if they do it illegally and they don't know English, they have further obstacles to overcome. And if it's not meritocratic, then we have to tell the brain surgeon from Kenya, or we have to tell the accountant from South Korea, or we have to tell the nuclear physicist from Argentina, sorry, you just didn't happen to live close enough to the Rio Grande, so you can't come. You may be legal, you may have a skill set that we need, but this is not how we're going to adjudicate it. And it doesn't seem that that's going to be either fair or legal. So we need to get immigration diverse from as many different places as possible,
so that you don't get overwhelmed by a single
one
culture,
particular
a single
group, and more importantly, that one particular group is not used by domestic political parties for their own electoral calculations, as it happened in the 19th century. And then it has to be legal, it has to be in numbers that can be assimilated, and it has to be meritocratic. It has to have a system why we say you can come and you can't. And we don't have that now.
Victor, the Wall Street Journal this past summer, quote, increasing net annual immigration by 50% a year would increase GDP growth on average from 1.7% to 2% a year over the next 35 years. It would also mean more workers per retiree, reducing the stress on Medicare and Social Security, close quote.
According to
let them in, it'll boost economic
according to the Wall
growth.
Street Journal, if that calculus was correct, why not let in 50 million? Because the GDP would grow even bigger. And the answer is that the Wall Street Journal thinks in terms of profit and loss, but not in culture and social life and stability. I came up here yesterday.
In other words, you're willing to grant that within some range, more immigrants might produce economic growth, but the other kinds of costs are too high.
I don't think they're calibrating certain costs, and by that I mean I came up here yesterday. Somebody who was
from Southern California.
Somebody who was here illegally was in a semi and flipped it and blocked the entire 6 lanes of the 99 freeway. Last week, some gangbangers, for the first time in the history of my local school, shot an automatic weapon and closed down a football game. First time it ever happened. So there are social problems when you bring so many people, and the host, us, no longer believes in the melting pot, but has rebranded it the salad bowl, and we feel it's hurtful, unfair, not right, not to assimilate, integrate, and intermarry people. The tragedy of all this is that people who came in the past, i.e. before 30 years ago, and they're in my own family who are Mexican-American. I have a sister-in-law who's Mexican-American, I have nieces and nephews. It worked perfectly. They had the same experience as the Italian-Americans of the 19th century. Today, if I say to you, is Rudy Giuliani or the Cuomos, what political party? Cuomo, Giuliani, you wouldn't know. You would say, well, one's Democrat and one's Republican, because it's incidental, not essential to their character,
right? Because
they've been assimilated. We don't have an Italian-American studies department in the way that we have La Raza. Nobody in the Italian-American community says, I'm a member of La Raza with 2 Z's, the way Mussolini said. They say they don't do it because they have no need to, because they've been assimilated. And You know, everybody has this problem. I grew up my father only bought used Volvos. We had to eat Swedish crackers. We had to buy Electrolux's vacuum cleaner.
Because you were good Swedes.
Because we were good Swedes.
But your father served in the Second World War.
I said to my dad when I'm in high school, Dad, they're all played out. Kingsburg is no longer a Swedish community. They're all intermarried. It doesn't exist anymore. And he said, yeah, you're right. And I didn't learn Swedish. So the point I'm making is that if we were to go back to that system, then all of this political, ethnic, chauvinistic identity politics would die on the vine. But too many people are invested in it, and it's been very lucrative for a number of people's careers.
The legacy of Barack Obama. Victor Davis Hanson, quote, President Obama has systematically adopted a rhetoric and an agenda that is predicated on dividing up the country according to tribal grievances in hopes of recalibrating various factions into a majority grievance culture. A majority grievance culture. He has succeeded politically, but in doing so, he has nearly torn the country apart. Barack Obama, first of all, what do you mean by a majority grievance culture?
Well, it means that 51% of the population feels that they have a grievance against the population. And so when you say that gays and women and Latinos and Asians and blacks and people of mixed ancestry and the disabled, each person can
get
find
up to 70% of the population.
Each person can say that my particular identity is essential, not incidental to my character. And we're talking right now when we have riots going on in Charlotte, North Carolina, in a parent's situation where an African-American policeman shot an African-American suspect who may probably have been armed with an African-American police chief, and that set off a riot. And that suggests that people, if they're going to riot in a situation, they, meaning the protesters, what if the police chief had been white? What if the officer involved had been Asian? It wouldn't have would it have been worse, less worse? I don't know. But we reached a situation in which we're going to have to come to terms with a lot of situations. That the president, when he came into office, he did things that I hadn't seen in my lifetime. I've never heard a presidential candidate say typical white person, at least not since reading about it in the 1920s or 30s. Woodrow Wilson was the last person to identify that strongly with race. I don't, when you say you enter in, I didn't hear Bill Clinton say in the O.J. trial, well, Nicole Simpson looks like the second daughter I might have had, right in the middle of the trial, and the way that Obama editorialized about Trayvon Martin. And then you get into the beer summit, and all of that language created this image that it was okay to identify by your tribal affiliation. And that had been something in America. We're the only multiracial society. If anybody can find an example in the Balkans or Rwanda or Iraq where it works, tell me about it. But it's never worked, doesn't work very well in India. But we're the only ones that worked. And it was because for all the problems of slavery and Jim Crow and discrimination, the original European colonist who came to this continent evolved according to the ideas in the Declaration and the Constitution that race would eventually be insignificant. And it's hard for a majority population to do that, but we are evolving in the right direction. Apparently, under Obama, we felt that that's impossible, so that we are prisoners of our past, and it's important that we all identify according to tribal affiliations. And that's where we're going right now. And I don't think there's any history that I know of where that's going to work out well.